Where are we at? 6.52. Let's have a look at currencies.
Currencies on Dubai Eye 103.8.
With insurancemarket.ae.
Dollar strong and still strong at the moment. Let's have a look at what that means for popular remittances here in the region. $1 is the equivalent of 79.55 Indian rupees. A Philippine peso currently at 56.38 to the dollar. The Pakistani rupee at 218, just shy of 219 in fact. A Sri Lankan rupee down to 359 this morning. And the South African rand, if you're looking to change some rand for dollar at the moment, 17.17 for our South African listeners.
Save time and money. Only the leading insurance companies. Insurancemarket.ae, the largest in the UAE. For your car, your health, home, life or business. Get everything sorted with super quickness. Call 800-ALFRED. Insurancemarket.ae.
This is the Business Breakfast on Dubai Eye on 1 on the UAE's #1 talk radio station. We are talking office space in the week that we're all going back to one. But for how long? Dubai is apparently in the top 20 globally in terms of growth markets for flexible office space. That's according to the guys at Savills. And we're very pleased to be joined by the Savills Middle East Manager for International Corporate Services, Henry Mathews. Morning, Henry.
Morning, Brandy.
So when we're talking about flexible office space, what are we talking about?
Well, with flexible office spaces, you've got really two types. You've got they're managed facilities by third-party operators. So that can include private office space and then also co-working space. The differentiation between them being with the private office space, you have your own cabin, if you like, within the co-working centre, and the co-working space being desk space that you might hire on a membership basis.
And if we've made the top 20 as a growth market, is that because of what we have and are doing now or what we might be doing?
I think it's a combination of both. Dubai handled the pandemic fantastically, and I think as a result we've seen such high demand in the office market. That's across the board, and also in flex space offering as well. So, yeah, in this market, we've got several serviced office providers expanding now. We've got a lot of new market entrants as well. And Dubai's a springboard as well for the wider Middle East. You'll see people coming to this market and using it as a market tester and then moving into other locations within the Middle East.
How do the costs compare for those renting? How does it compare to just renting an office?
So operationally, they're generally more expensive, but the important differentiator with the serviced offices or the flex space offices is the cost up front. With a traditional office space, you've obviously got capital expenditure costs to fit out the office, whereas with the serviced offices, you're not paying that. And it's more monthly payments as well, so it's much more manageable for companies, particularly out of the pandemic now, where we're in more uncertain economic times. And
the serviced office model here isn't new. For the last 20 years I've been here, you've been able to rent a space and have someone pretend to be your secretary, put a call through, press line 3. Who's using it now, though? Are we seeing a change?
We are seeing a change. We're seeing a change here, and we're also seeing a change globally. I think traditionally there's been there's a misconception maybe that they're just for US tech firms based strictly around technology. However, we're seeing across a variety of sectors uptake in the use of flexible space across the legal sector, financial services, pharmaceutical services as well. It's also larger scale-ups and international corporates using them. I think over the last year there's been an increase to 42% occupation across the markets we studied, compared to 37% from the large scale-ups and international corporates.
But if it's more expensive than having a conventional office, why do it?
Well, it's a point-in-time solution. So serviced offices aren't something potentially you see yourself in long-term. They're usually to accommodate potentially a period of rapid growth, potentially a period of uncertainty. So what they do is they manage a cost flow over the period that you're in them, and then potentially you look to expand out whilst you're making a decision. You can then expand out into potentially that building or your own traditional space.
And if that's growing here at the moment, what does that say about where we are economically?
I think it's a very encouraging sign. Across the commercial market, residential market, the market sentiment's extremely positive at the moment, and the demand that we're seeing is definitely reflecting that in this market. And then I think the other part is the expansion that we're seeing from the serviced office providers, whether that's in their own space or whether that is into new areas within Dubai and the wider Middle East.
How does it fit in with the hybrid working model, though? I thought we were all supposed to all be using less office space.
Well, I think, again, it comes down to there's obviously the flexibility it's offered, but then there's also the people element as well. With the serviced offices or the flex space, they can be testing models. They can be locations where you can test the hybrid working models. You can ease people's potential concerns about coming back to the office with these spaces. So whilst they obviously offer short-term benefits economically for companies, they're also a space for testing and also a space to mitigate, during the uncertain economic times as well.
OK, well, the other half of this equation is, of course, the supply. Do landlords here want to do this rather than having someone locked in for a year or years?
I think we've seen, this is where the pandemic's been a really interesting change for this market, is we're seeing more landlords definitely open to this concept. And generally for landlords, there's massive benefits to having flex space operators. You can keep existing tenants you've got in the building, they can be retained, whether they're maybe right-sizing, whether they're expanding themselves. It's almost swing space for them to do that. It's also these serviced office operators, flex space operators have their own international networks, and they can encourage tenant attraction to the buildings that they can then outgrow the space and move into the landlord's facility. And then finally, it's the rent. You're looking at these spaces being a huge markup on what you would get for just a standard office space. Let's say, for example, 100 dirhams standard, you can charge potentially up to 400 dirhams per desk, and then you've obviously got more spaces. So it's massively beneficial for landlords.
1 minute left with you, Henry. Is grey space entering into this? Floor space that a company might not be using themselves that they're looking to rent out to others?
Yeah, in this market, I mean, subleasing generally is fairly uncommon in this market, and it's always at landlord's consent. So you don't generally see companies taking space and then subleasing it. And part of the reason being is that lease terms here are relatively short. You're looking at an average of 3 to 5 years. There are some locations where that is changing. ICD Brookfield Place, for example, have been locking in tenants over longer terms. In Dubai Science Park as well is the same. So it's not something we see too often, companies taking space and then subleasing it.
Henry Mathews is the Middle East manager at Savills for International Corporate Services, speaking to us this morning about Dubai making the top 20 globally in terms of growth markets for flexible office space. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, big thanks to Henry.